You really think you belong in a ring with me, girl? You're nothing but street trash. I'll knock the ghetto out of you before the first bell even stops ringing. The words dripped with venom. Amplified by the microphone the champion insisted on holding. The arena roared with laughter, the crowd feeding off his arrogance. The flashing lights, the flashing cameras, every lens was pointed at him as if the humiliation of a young black woman was entertainment. Kesha Campbell stood silent in her corner, her chin slightly raised, her gloves laced tightly, and her heart steady. She had heard words like that her entire life, on the streets of Kingston, in the crowded gyms that never wanted her, from men who thought her place was in the shadows, never under the spotlight. She didn't flinch. She didn't smirk. She let the champion's voice echo and fill the space, because she knew every word was fuel. The match was billed as a charity exhibition, a gimmick to draw headlines, sell pay-per-view buys, and feed the ego of the reigning world champion, Damien the Cobra Cross. Cross was a man who thrived on cruelty disguised as charisma. With his shiny belt draped over his shoulder and his designer robe glittering under the lights, he looked untouchable, untarnished, and undefeated. But beneath the swagger, this fight wasn't about sport. It was a trap carefully laid. Cross had announced weeks earlier that he would give a little nobody a chance to shine. In truth, he wanted a prop, someone easy to mock, someone to serve as a living punching bag. He picked Kesha Campbell, a young woman from the slums of Kingston, a fighter without a trainer, a fighter without a promoter, a fighter without a name. To him, she was perfect. On me. The press had lapped it up. Headlines screamed with mockery disguised as curiosity. Bad, Cobra versus Lightning. Will the girl even last a round? Early, Cross faces Street Fighter. Is this a joke or just a warm-up? Early, from Kingston to catastrophe. Campbell steps into the lion's den. Every headline painted her as the sacrifice. Every commentator treated her like a punchline. As the announcer's booming voice shook the rafters, "Ladies and gentlemen, the undefeated champion of the world, Damien the Cobra Cross." The crowd leapt to its feet. He basked in the applause, throwing his arms wide, smirking as if he had already won. When Kesha's name was called, the cheers dwindled to scattered claps and a chorus of jeers. She walked to the center of the ring with quiet dignity, her dark braids tied back tightly, her gloves glinting faintly under the spotlight. Her shorts were plain, no sponsors, no glitter, no brand logos. Just black fabric with one word stitched in white by her grandmother's hands. Lightning. Powerful adolescent. Cross stepped forward, towering over her, leaning so close she could feel his breath. After tonight, sweetheart, go back to the streets where you belong. Boxing is a man's game. You're just a charity case. The referee's eyes darted nervously, but he said nothing. The audience howled. To the crowd, this was theater. To Cross, this was ego. To Kesha, this was survival. She thought of the nights back in Kingston, when electricity cut out, and she shadowboxed by candlelight, her fists slicing the humid air. She thought of the scraps in back alleys, where each fight wasn't for a belt, but for bread. She thought of her mother, who told her that dignity was not given by others. It was taken back, punch by punch if necessary. A chew, but none of that was visible to the world watching. To them, she was a lamb led to slaughter. The commentators sharpened the knife. This is going to be over in seconds. She's out of her depth. Cross is going to toy with her. Honestly, I'm surprised they sanctioned this. The bell had not even rung, and already the verdict was sealed in their minds. Cross strutted around her like a predator circling prey. He raised his gloves mockingly, making exaggerated jabs in the air, grinning as the crowd roared with laughter. He leaned over the ropes and blew kisses to the fans. Every gesture screamed, "This is my show. She's just a prop." But in the stillness of her corner, Kesha's heartbeat was steady. She had been underestimated her entire life. The jeers didn't shake her. The bright lights didn't blind her. She had one thing Cross did not: hunger. Hunger to prove herself, hunger to silence every doubt, hunger that had been sharpened by years of surviving in the shadows. The referee brought them together for the instructions. Cross stared at her with disdain. Kesha's gaze was unwavering, sharp as the nickname stitched across her shorts. Lightning doesn't announce itself. It just strikes. Touch gloves, the referee ordered. Cross slammed his glove into hers with unnecessary force, trying to rattle her. She didn't move an inch. He smirked. She blinked slowly, almost imperceptibly, but in that blink was a promise. This isn't going the way you think. The bell was about to ring. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, ready for an easy show, a humiliating spectacle. Phones were raised high, ready to capture what they thought would be her downfall. But in that moment, under the blinding lights, beneath the noise, beyond the arrogance, Kesha Campbell felt calm. She knew something the champion didn't: that every insult, every jeer, every dismissal had only sharpened her resolve. This wasn't just a fight. This was justice wrapped in gloves. And justice was about to land its first blow. The spotlight may have found her in that glittering arena, but Kesha Campbell's story began far from flashing bulbs and polished canvases. Her roots were buried deep in Kingston's slums, where survival was not a sport, it was the only law. The place where she grew up wasn't painted in bright colors like tourist postcards promised. It was painted in rust, in concrete cracked by heat, in zinc fences that rattled when storms came. The streets smelled of jerk chicken one corner, burning garbage the next. The soundscape was a constant hum, reggae beats leaking from old radios, arguments spilling from shop fronts, the bark of stray dogs, the occasional gunshot splitting the night. For most children, play meant laughter. For Kesha, play meant running errands before dark, carrying water up broken stairwells, weaving between men with sharp eyes and quicker tempers. She was small, wiry, but with a spirit that refused to bend. Her father had disappeared before she could remember his face. Her mother worked 3 jobs, cleaning houses uptown, cooking for neighbors, and braiding hair late into the night by candlelight. Yet, even in exhaustion, her mother repeated one lesson. Child, the world don't owe you respect. You take it with your own 2 hands. It was those hands, scarred, calloused, quick, that began shaping her legend. Kesha's first fights weren't in gyms. They were in back alleys behind corrugated metal shacks, where boys twice her size would dare her to stand her ground. They laughed at first. What could a skinny girl do? But when fists flew, laughter turned into groans, and eventually, silence. She wasn't just fighting boys, she was fighting hunger, fighting hopelessness, fighting the idea that she was supposed to stay small. Word spread. By 13, she was known across her block as the girl who fights like lightning. She wasn't bulky, but her fists moved with a speed that left opponents dazed before they realized she'd even struck. The name Lightning stuck, not just because she was fast, but because she struck without warning. In Kingston's underground, where bare fists met concrete walls and money exchanged hands under dim lights, Lightning became a whisper. Men bet against her, and men lost fortunes. Some tried to break her spirit with dirty tricks, elbows, headbutts, insults meant to cut deeper than bruises. But Kesha never backed down. She learned to weave not just around fists, but around life itself. Yet every victory came with a price. Her knuckles split open so often they grew calluses like armor. Her ribs carried memories of knees and punches she never forgot. And at night, as she iced her wounds with melted freezer packs, she dreamed of something bigger. Not money, not fame, respect. She would sneak into gyms uptown, places that smelled of disinfectant and fresh tape, not sweat-soaked concrete. Trainers laughed at her, waved her away. We don't waste time on charity cases, one told her. Another was more blunt. You don't look like no champion. Go braid hair like your mama. But every rejection sharpened her. She watched through windows, memorizing footwork, studying drills, mimicking combinations on invisible bags when no one was looking. When a trainer barked, "You'll never make it," she heard instead, "Prove me wrong." Her schooling was the streets, but her education was discipline. She ran barefoot through Kingston's hills at dawn, sweat rolling into her eyes, lungs burning, legs aching. She shadowboxed until her arms screamed, then went 2 rounds more. She punched walls when bags were unavailable, strengthening her bones until her fists felt like iron. Still, the scars weren't only physical. She saw girls her age swallowed by the streets, pulled into gangs, trapped in cycles of violence, silenced by poverty. She fought not just for herself, but for every girl who'd been told her story ended at the corner of her block. At 16, her first real break came. An underground promoter, half drunk and amused, tossed her into a fight against a local favorite. He thought it would be funny to watch her fail. She knocked the man out cold in the second round with a hook so sharp the crowd went silent. The promoter laughed nervously, realizing the joke had turned. The crowd started chanting her name. Lightning. 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 From then, her reputation grew. Street fights turned into underground bouts. Underground bouts turned into whispers across the island. But still, the official gyms, the polished rings, the sanctioned fights remained closed. No manager wanted a poor black girl from the slums. No promoter wanted a fighter who didn't fit the poster. It didn't matter. Kesha kept fighting. She fought for coins in backyards, for groceries in alleys, for dignity wherever she could find it. Every opponent underestimated her. Every opponent paid. The day Damien the Cobra Cross announced his charity exhibition, Kesha was training barefoot on cracked asphalt. A boy ran up shouting, "Lightning! They call your name on the radio!" She didn't believe it at first, but then the message spread. Cross wanted her. Not because she was ready, not because she was respected, because humiliating her would make him look bigger. For a moment, Kesha considered refusing. Why step into a circus when she'd bled for real fights all her life? But then she remembered her mother's words. Respect is taken, not given. And here, on the grandest stage, was a chance to take it from the one man who thought he could deny it. The fight posters plastered across Jamaica mocked her with every brushstroke. Cross in golden trunks, arms raised in triumph. Kesha in grainy photos, eyes hardened, fists clenched. The caption, "Cobra versus Lightning, a show, not a fight." The world expected a farce. They expected a lamb to the slaughter. They expected her to collapse in a few seconds and vanish back into anonymity. But Kesha knew better. She knew what they didn't. That she had been forged in storms far harsher than any bright arena. The ring wasn't foreign to her. The crowd wasn't terrifying. The champion wasn't unbeatable. Lightning doesn't ask for permission. Lightning doesn't wait for applause. Its purpose. It strikes. And Kesha Campbell was ready to strike. The bell had barely finished echoing when Damien the Cobra Cross strutted forward like a king surveying a conquered kingdom. His body gleamed under the floodlights, sweat already shining though the round had only just begun. He grinned wide for the cameras, his teeth a flash of arrogance as he circled Kesha with deliberate exaggeration, hips swaying, gloves dangling low. "This is going to be fun," he sneered loudly enough for the front rows to hear. The words weren't for Kesha, they were for the audience, for the sponsors, for the headlines he was already writing in his head. The crowd erupted in laughter as he dropped his guard and tapped his chin with his glove, daring her to take a swing. Commentators chuckled along. "See that? He's playing with her. This is showboating at its finest. She doesn't stand a chance." Cross thrived on this theater. He had built his career not only on fists, but on humiliation. Every fight was a performance. Sneers, taunts, exaggerated gestures. He broke opponents not just with power, but with mockery, making them crumble under the weight of their own shame before his fists ever landed the finishing blow. And tonight, his chosen stage prop was a young black woman he believed did not belong in his world. He threw a lazy jab, deliberately missing by inches, letting the glove brush past her cheek. The crowd roared as if it were a knockout punch. He turned to the commentators, shrugging his shoulders as if to say, "She's not even worth the effort." Kesha stayed quiet, eyes sharp, body steady. She didn't bite, she didn't react. Her fists stayed in place, her stance coiled, watching. To the untrained eye, she looked passive. To anyone who knew survival, she looked patient. Cross twirled in a circle, raising his arms to the crowd. "You paid for a fight, right? Don't blink or you'll miss it." His words echoed over the microphone he'd demanded be live for the first round. Another indulgence the promoters allowed because spectacle meant profit. He feigned a lunge, then stepped back laughing. The crowd ate it up, clapping, chanting his name. This wasn't sport to them, it was theater of cruelty. Another jab, harder this time, clipped Kesha's shoulder. She absorbed it, sliding back just an inch, and reset her feet. Cross puffed his chest like a rooster. "Too slow, sweetheart." Phones lit up throughout the arena, thousands of lenses capturing what they thought would be the beginning of her humiliation. Clips were already being shared online. Cobra toys with the street girl. But behind the bravado, a careful eye might have noticed something else. Cross's punches, though flashy, were loose. His guard stayed low. His feet danced more for show than balance. He wasn't focused. He wasn't calculating. He was reveling in his own arrogance, and that arrogance was a crack waiting to split. He threw a combination, a sloppy flurry aimed more at making noise than causing damage. His gloves slapped against her arms and ribs, loud enough for the microphones to amplify, but not sharp enough to end anything. Kesha's body absorbed the blows like stone against rain. She kept her guard tight, her breathing steady. To Cross, her silence meant fear. To Kesha, silence was the art of listening. The commentators carried on their smug analysis. "She's frozen. She doesn't know what to do. This could end before the next round." But under their words, murmurs began in the crowd. A few sharp-eyed fans noticed she wasn't rattled. She wasn't flinching. She was studying. Cross didn't notice. He danced to the ropes, throwing his hands up like a showman. He leaned back, arms out wide, basking in the chorus of cheers. Then he turned back, smirk painted across his face, and gestured at Kesha. "Come on, Lightning, strike me. Show me what you've got." It was the ultimate taunt, mocking her nickname, mocking her story, mocking her very presence in the ring. Kesha's jaw tightened for just a moment. Her gloves didn't move, her breathing didn't change. She simply blinked once, her gaze narrowing. Cross mistook it for weakness. He lunged recklessly, swinging a looping hook meant to end the round in spectacular fashion. The punch whistled through the air, missing by an inch as Kesha slipped under it with quiet precision. She pivoted, her foot sliding across the canvas, her body aligned like an arrow pulled taut. She didn't strike. Not yet. She simply reset, eyes still locked on him. The crowd gasped. A moment of silence cut through the noise, short, sharp, disorienting. Cross stumbled slightly from his overextended hook. He recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "Lucky move. Won't happen again." But deep down, a splinter of doubt began to form. Kesha had seen it. The sloppiness, the overconfidence, the cracks in the armor. She had spent her life reading fighters who underestimated her, waiting for the moment when arrogance exposed vulnerability. And Damien Cross had just offered her a glimpse. Still, the first round was his theater. He pranced, he posed, he jeered. He raised his arms and invited cheers, his every gesture dripping with the arrogance of a man convinced he was untouchable. To the audience, it was entertainment. To Cross, it was triumph. To Kesha, it was the mask of a man already blind to the storm building quietly in the corner. The bell rang, ending the first round. Cross strutted back to his corner like a peacock, waving to the cameras, smirking at his entourage ringside. He flexed, kissed his gloves, winked at a fan in the front row. Kesha walked back without expression. No taunts, no theatrics. She sat on her stool, her chest rising and falling evenly, her eyes never leaving her opponent. The commentators praised Cross's dominance, replaying his showboating like highlights. But buried beneath the cheers, beneath the mockery, a different current began to stir. A girl who was supposed to be humiliated had not flinched. A fighter meant to be broken had not bent. A storm, silent and gathering, was waiting for its moment. And Damien Cross had no idea that his arrogance had just become his greatest weakness. The second round began with the same cruel confidence as the first. Damien Cross came forward with a swagger that belonged more to an entertainer than a fighter. He wagged his glove like a finger in a scolding motion, playing to the audience. "Time to tuck you back in bed, little girl," he barked loudly, his voice booming over the crowd noise. The arena responded with laughter, whistles, and claps. His arrogance was the soundtrack of the night. But under the bright lights, something subtle had shifted. Kesha Campbell stood taller now. Her stance seemed lighter, sharper, her eyes locked not on his shoulders or his taunts, but on his rhythm. The rhythm of his arrogance. The way his feet hit the mat when he showboated. The way his guard dropped a little lower every time he raised his arms to draw applause. She had watched the first round with the patience of someone who'd lived her whole life on defense. Now it was time to respond. Cross lunged with another lazy jab, expecting her to flinch. Instead, Kesha stepped in. Not back, but in. Her body angled perfectly. She slipped under the jab, close enough to feel the brush of air as the glove sailed over her ear. Then, with a sudden twist of her torso, she fired a short, snapping uppercut to his ribs. It wasn't a knockout blow. It wasn't meant to be. But it landed clean, sharp, and loud enough for the microphones to catch the thump. The crowd gasped. Cross's smirk faltered for the first time. He stepped back quickly, pretending to laugh it off, raising his arms as if to say, "That's all you've got?" But the silence that followed the laughter told a different story. For a split second, thousands of eyes realized that the girl who was supposed to be humiliated had drawn first blood. Kesha didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She didn't raise her arms. She reset her stance, eyes forward, calm as the sea before a storm. Cross came forward again, faster this time. His punches, though still flashy, carried more force. He jabbed, hooked, swung, trying to reassert dominance. Kesha's guard absorbed them, her body swaying just out of reach, her feet sliding like water on glass. She was no longer a statue absorbing punishment. She was movement itself. Slipping, weaving, ducking. And then it happened again. Cross threw a wide right hook meant for spectacle. Kesha ducked low, pivoted left, and let her fist fly. A straight jab, lightning quick, snapped across his jaw. It wasn't devastating, but it was clean, precise. The champion's head snapped to the side, sweat spraying in a fine mist under the lights. The crowd's reaction split in half. Cheers erupted from those who loved an underdog. Boos poured in from those who couldn't stomach seeing their champion touched. But no one could deny what had just happened. The girl from Kingston had scored. The commentator's tone shifted, ever so slightly. Okay, she's showing some fight. That was sharper than I expected. Cross might need to tighten up here. Cross wiped his mouth with the back of his glove, his face tightening. His arrogance had been pierced. Not shattered yet, but pierced. He charged again, faster now, swinging combinations designed to overwhelm. And for a while, it worked. Kesha ate a jab, felt a hook graze her temple, absorbed another to her midsection. But she never backed down. Every time he landed, she found a way to answer. Not big punches, not wild swings, small counters, snaps to the ribs, short jabs to the chin, flickers of lightning reminding everyone watching that storms don't start with thunder, they start with a spark. By the end of the round, Cross was breathing heavier. Not gasping, not exhausted, but heavier than before. The smirk had become a forced grin. His theatrics felt less like confidence and more like a mask. Kesha sat in her corner, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. She didn't need pep talks, didn't need a trainer shouting instructions. She'd spent her life learning to adapt, to read, to endure. Her corner was silence, and silence was enough. The third round began, and Cross tried to regain control of the narrative. He raised his arms, shouted to the crowd, bounced on his toes, but when he threw his first jab, Kesha slipped under and countered with a sharp left hook to the ribs. The sound cracked through the arena. The crowd rose to its feet. Another exchange. Cross swung wildly. Kesha slipped again, delivering a jab to his face. His head snapped back. The smirk was gone now. Lightning! Someone screamed from the stands. Then another voice joined. And another. Soon, chants began to ripple. Lightning! 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 The arrogance that had filled the air at the start was thinning, replaced by something more electric, more dangerous. Cross, red-faced, charged recklessly, his punches losing their polish. He wanted to end it now, to crush her before the chants grew louder. But in his rage, he left himself wide open. Kesha saw it. A wild right hook, sloppy, overextended. She slipped inside, coiled her body, and drove a straight left hook to the ribs. The sound cracked through the arena. The crowd rose to its feet. Another exchange. Cross swung wildly. Kesha slipped again, delivering a jab to his face. His head snapped back. The smirk was gone now. Lightning! Someone screamed from the stands. Then another voice joined. And another. Soon, chants began to ripple. Lightning! 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 The arrogance that had filled the air at the start was thinning, replaced by something more electric, more dangerous. Cross, red-faced, charged recklessly, his punches losing their polish. He wanted to end it now, to crush her before the chants grew louder. But in his rage, he left himself wide open. Kesha saw it. A wild right hook, sloppy, overextended. She slipped inside, coiled her body, and drove a straight left into his midsection. The sound was unmistakable. Fist meeting flesh with brutal clarity. Cross staggered back, clutching his ribs for half a second before straightening, forcing composure. The referee's eyes widened. The commentators grew silent. The crowd erupted. The turning point had come. For the first time in his career, Damien Cross looked unsure. The cameras caught his face, tightened jaw, narrowed eyes, sweat dripping down his temples. He still raised his gloves, still strutted between punches, but the swagger wasn't effortless anymore. It was strained. It was defensive. And Kesha? She didn't change. Calm, focused, patient, like the storm waiting on the horizon. When the bell rang to end the third round, the noise in the arena was different. No longer just laughter, no longer just mockery. It was energy, tense and electric, as if everyone realized the script they'd been promised might not play out as expected. The arrogant showman had found his match, and the girl meant to be humiliated had begun rewriting the story. By the fourth round, the air in the arena had transformed. When Damien the Cobra Cross first strutted into the ring, the atmosphere was carnival-like. Laughs, jeers, confidence from a crowd that believed humiliation was a guarantee. But now, something new pulsed through the thousands of spectators. Unease, excitement, curiosity. The chants of lightning, lightning, had not vanished. They had grown louder. Cross stormed out of his corner, jaw clenched, eyes sharp with irritation. Gone was the relaxed swagger of the earlier rounds. He threw punches with venom now, fast hooks, hard jabs, combinations meant not to entertain, but to destroy. Every strike was designed to put an end to the girl who had dared to dent his pride. Kesha Campbell absorbed some shots, her ribs burning from the weight of his fists. She staggered slightly when a right hook clipped her jaw. The crowd gasped, half expecting her to fall, but she didn't. Her knees bent, her guard rose higher, and she reset. Her eyes remained steady, locked on him. She answered. Not with wild swings, Not with reckless defiance, with calculated counters. A jab to his cheekbone, a hook to his ribs. Each shot was a whisper, a reminder.
You cannot break me.
Cross's frustration grew with each exchange. He had mocked her as a charity case. He had promised an easy show. But now, halfway through the fight, he was sweating harder than he ever had in the early rounds of any match. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His footwork grew less precise. His combinations, once crisp, began to carry desperation. The commentators shifted from arrogance to alarm.
This isn't the same fight we thought we were watching.
Cross looks rattled.
She's not backing down. She's pushing him.
The crowd felt it too. The tide was turning. Not in a flash knockout, but in a slow erosion. Every arrogant smirk that had once drawn cheers now felt hollow. Every lazy taunt now felt forced. Cross tried to silence the shift. He threw a crushing uppercut, the kind of punch that had ended careers before. It sliced the air just inches from Kesha's chin as she slipped left, her braids whipping across her shoulders. In the same motion, she fired a jab into his exposed ribs. The sound cracked through the microphones, echoing around the arena like a gunshot. The champion winced, just for a second, but the cameras caught it. The audience saw it. The world watching online clipped it, replayed it, slowed it down. A moment of weakness, captured forever. Kesha's face didn't change. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She simply reset her stance. Calm, controlled, patient. Cross roared in anger, trying to drown the chance of lightning with his fists. He charged forward, throwing everything: hooks, jabs, body shots, an avalanche of punches. But his form was unraveling. His timing slipped. His accuracy faltered. And Kesha, forged in alleys where mistakes meant broken bones, read every weakness. She ducked, she weaved, she countered. Her fists were fast, snapping out like lightning bolts, striking and vanishing before Cross could react. For the first time, the champion looked hunted. By the fifth round, sweat poured down his face, dripping into his eyes. His chest heaved. His punches grew slower. The crowd, once his adoring stage, now roared for the underdog he had tried to humiliate. Kesha's ribs ached. Her jaw throbbed. Her arms trembled slightly under the weight of holding her guard. But her heart remained unshaken. She had not trained for comfort. She had trained for survival. She had fought in conditions Cross could never imagine, on cracked asphalt, against men twice her size, without referees, without rules, without mercy. Pain was not new. Pain was home. She let him swing, let him burn himself out with flurries meant to intimidate. Then, when his arms grew heavy, she struck. A jab to his chin, a hook to his midsection, another jab, snapping his head back. Each shot chipped away at his aura of invincibility. The arena erupted. Fans who had jeered her now stood on their feet, chanting, clapping, stomping. The noise thundered down on the ring, a storm that fed her nickname. Lightning had struck, and thunder was answering. Cross tried to rally. He raised his gloves, screamed at the crowd, forced a smirk onto his face. But his movements betrayed him. His legs wobbled slightly as he circled. His hands, once loose and confident, now twitched with tension. His eyes, once playful, now carried flickers of doubt. The cameras zoomed in. Commentators leaned into their microphones. This is unreal. She's taking control. The champion looks beaten, not by power, but by will. Because this was no longer about punches. It was about spirit. Every time Cross tried to impose his will, Kesha refused to break. Every time he tried to silence her, she answered. And every answer grew louder. By the sixth round, the balance had flipped entirely. Cross was swinging wildly, desperate to reclaim his dominance. Kesha was calm, deliberate, striking with surgical precision. She wasn't just surviving, she was dismantling him piece by piece. The crowd knew it, the commentators knew it. Even Cross, deep in his chest, knew it. And Kesha, she only thought of one thing: Her mother's words. Respect isn't given, it's taken. With every punch, she was taking it back. The arrogant champion who had dragged her into this ring to be a joke was now the punchline himself. The girl from Kingston, the one they dismissed as trash, was proving not only that she belonged, but that she could dominate. When the bell rang to end the 6th round, Cross staggered to his corner, his chest heaving, his smirk shattered. He sat on his stool, shoulders slumped, sweat dripping down his arms. His trainer barked instructions, but his eyes betrayed fear. Kesha walked to her corner with steady steps, her chest rising evenly, her gaze locked on him. The fight had begun as a spectacle meant to humiliate her. Now it had become something else entirely. A battle of wills, and Kesha Campbell's will was winning. The 7th round began not with the arrogance of a champion, but with the desperate shuffle of a man who knew his empire was cracking. Damien the Cobra Cross rose from his stool slower than before, his chest heaving, his jaw tight. The crowd, once his cheering army, had split in half, some still calling his name, others now chanting,
Lightning! Lightning!
with raw conviction. Kesha Campbell rose differently. No entourage in her corner, no booming pep talk, just her own breath, steady and controlled, and the memory of every street fight she had ever survived. She stood tall, her gloves firm, her braids damp with sweat, her eyes sharp with unshakable calm. She had seen men like Cross before, men who believed their status made them untouchable, men who mistook arrogance for power, men who fell hardest when the storm finally came. Cross came forward, throwing a jab. It was heavy but slow, predictable, tired. Kesha slipped left, her feet sliding across the canvas with the grace of water. She answered with a lightning jab that snapped his head back. The crowd gasped. He tried again. A looping right hook. She ducked under, pivoted, and landed a clean shot to his ribs. His body bent slightly from the impact, his breath forced out in a grunt. Commentators leaned in closer to their microphones, their voices sharp with disbelief. She's punishing him. Cross is in trouble here. Can you believe what we're seeing? The champion's face twisted into rage. He roared and lunged, throwing wild punches, haymakers, overhands, flurries of desperation. The crowd roared with him, sensing either redemption or collapse. But Kesha had seen this before. The streets had trained her for chaos. She did not panic. She did not retreat. She let him swing, let him waste what little strength he had left. Each missed punch drained him further. Each failed blow reminded the world that arrogance cannot beat discipline. And then, she struck. Cross threw a reckless uppercut, leaving his chin exposed. Kesha slipped inside, coiled her body, and unleashed a left hook that cracked across his jaw like thunder. The sound echoed through the arena. His head snapped sideways. Sweat flew in a halo under the lights. His knees buckled. The crowd exploded. Cross staggered, arms flailing as he tried to steady himself. His legs wobbled like a tower on the verge of collapse. Kesha didn't pause. She didn't gloat. She advanced with precision, her fists moving like lightning bolts. Jab, hook, cross. Each punch landed cleaner than the last, each one chiseling away at the myth of the invincible champion. The chants of lightning, lightning, shook the rafters now. Even those who had mocked her at the start were on their feet, screaming, phones raised high to capture history in motion. Cross stumbled into the ropes. The referee hovered, uncertain, watching carefully. Kesha feinted left, then launched the combination that sealed destiny. A right jab to open him, a left hook to the ribs to fold him, and then, her right fist, coiled and unleashed like a storm, crashed into his jaw with devastating force. Like lightning tank, lightning tracks trying on him. Cross's body twisted, his eyes glazed, and he crashed to the canvas. The arena gasped as if the air had been sucked out. The champion, the undefeated Cobra, lay sprawled on the floor, arms limp, mouth open. The referee dropped to his knees, beginning the count. The crowd erupted into a cacophony. Cheers, screams, disbelief. Phones shook as fans live-streamed history. Hashtags lit up instantly across social media. 2. Cross groaned, trying to push himself up. His arms trembled, refusing to obey. His legs kicked weakly, but his body betrayed him. 3. Kesha stood in her corner, breathing steady, eyes locked on him. She didn't celebrate. She didn't raise her arms. She simply waited, silent, calm, dignified. 4. Cross rolled onto his side, face twisted in pain. His trainer screamed from the corner, begging him to rise. His pride burned hotter than his wounds, but pride could not lift dead weight. 5. The crowd had risen entirely to their feet. The chants of lightning, lightning, thundered like drums of war. 6. Cross staggered to one knee, sweat dripping, mouth open as he gasped for air. His arms shook violently as he tried to stand. 7. He pushed upward, but his legs buckled. He fell forward, catching himself with his gloves. His head hung low. 8. The referee's voice grew louder, echoing through the speakers. Cross shook his head, teeth clenched, forcing himself upright once more. His body trembled, his pride screamed, but his eyes were distant. 9. He stood halfway, swaying like a reed in the wind. The referee looked at him carefully, searching his eyes, judging his balance. Cross tried to raise his gloves, but they drooped. 10. The referee waved his arms. The fight was over. The crowd erupted into chaos. Cheers, gasps, chants, disbelief. Damien the Cobra Cross, the arrogant champion who had dragged a young black woman into the ring to humiliate her, had been knocked out by the very girl he mocked. Kesha Campbell, lightning, raised her gloves quietly, her face calm, her dignity intact. She didn't scream, she didn't shout, she simply stood tall, letting the weight of the moment speak for itself. The commentators' voices cracked with shock. This is the upset of the century. History has been made tonight. She didn't just fight, she dismantled him. Cross's team rushed into the ring, cradling their fallen champion. His eyes fluttered open, but the swagger, the arrogance, the smirk, it was gone. All that remained was a broken man, staring up at the woman he had tried to belittle. Kesha Campbell, lightning, raised her gloves quietly, her face calm, her dignity intact. She didn't scream, she didn't shout, she simply stood tall, letting the weight of the moment speak for itself. The commentators' voices cracked with shock. This is the upset of the century. History has been made tonight. She didn't just fight, she dismantled him. Cross's team rushed into the ring, cradling their fallen champion. His eyes fluttered open, but the swagger, the arrogance, the smirk, it was gone. All that remained was a broken man, staring up at the woman he had tried to belittle. Kesha Campbell, lightning, raised her gloves quietly, her face calm, her dignity intact. She didn't scream, she didn't shout, she simply stood tall, letting the weight of the moment speak for itself. The commentators' voices cracked with shock. This is the upset of the century. History has been made tonight. She didn't just fight, she dismantled him. Cross's team rushed into the ring, cradling their fallen champion. His eyes fluttered open, but the swagger, the arrogance, the smirk, it was gone. All that remained was a broken man, staring up at the woman he had tried to belittle. Kesha glanced at him once, her gaze sharp, but not cruel. She didn't need to say anything. The fight had spoken. The referee raised her hand. The arena shook with the roar of thousands. Fireworks exploded overhead, but the loudest sound was the chant of her name. Lightning, lightning, lightning. Reporters swarmed ringside. Clips of the knockout spread instantly across the internet. Within minutes, her name trended worldwide. The girl from Kingston was no longer a punchline. She was a headline. For every child told they didn't belong. For every woman dismissed. For every fighter underestimated. Kesha Campbell had struck for them all. And in that moment, in that ring, the world realized something unthinkable. That arrogance had fallen, and dignity had risen, with one bolt of lightning. The roar of the crowd still echoed as Kesha Campbell stood in the center of the ring, her gloved hand raised by the referee. The cameras swarmed her, flashes like lightning bolts illuminating her calm face. To some, this was an upset. To others, it was a miracle, but to Kesha, it was inevitable. She looked around the arena, at the thousands of faces, some stunned, some ecstatic, some humbled. A few hours earlier, most of them had laughed at her, expecting her to be a spectacle, a joke, a footnote in Damien Cross's long list of easy victories. Now those same faces chanted her name. Lightning, 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 lightning. Their voices thunderous. Cross slumped in his corner, surrounded by his trainers and doctors. His eyes were half shut, his mouth swollen, his jaw stiff. The man who had strutted into the ring with gold-trimmed robes and arrogant words was unrecognizable. He wasn't a champion anymore. He was a lesson. Reporters shoved microphones toward Kesha, desperate for words. She didn't shout into them. She didn't gloat. She simply pulled off one glove and raised her fist into the air, a silent salute to every fighter who had ever been underestimated. The crowd erupted again, not because she had spoken, but because she didn't need to. The highlight reels played instantly on screens around the world. The knockout punch repeated in slow motion. Cross's jaw twisting, his body collapsing, Kesha standing tall. Clips went viral in minutes. Social media platforms flooded with hashtags, lightning strikes, respect her, history in the ring. Memes spread, not mocking her but celebrating her. Captions like, she came to be humiliated, she left a legend. Back in Kingston, in the crowded neighborhood where Kesha had once fought for scraps, people gathered around old televisions and cracked phones, shouting, crying, hugging. Children who had grown up seeing her shadow box in the streets screamed her nickname into the night sky. Mothers pointed to the screen and whispered to their daughters, "See, that's what dignity looks like." Even critics who once dismissed her scrambled to rewrite their narratives. Commentators who had mocked her as out of her depth now spoke of her with reverence. Sports journalists wrote feverishly, "Lightning Campbell shocks the world. Arrogance falls. Resilience rises." But Kesha wasn't thinking of headlines. She was thinking of her mother. She remembered the nights when her mother's hands were raw from braiding hair by candlelight. She remembered the words that had carried her through the darkest days. Respect isn't given, child. It's taken. Tonight, in front of millions, she had taken it. Not just for herself, but for her mother, for her block, for every girl who had been told she didn't belong. As she left the ring, her steps were slow, deliberate. The crowd reached for her, eager to touch her gloves, to share in her glory. But she stayed composed, neither cold nor overjoyed. She carried herself like someone who had been here all along, someone who had always known this moment was hers. Backstage, journalists begged for interviews. Promoters shoved contracts in her path. Sponsors dangled opportunities. For the first time, the world wanted her. But she waved them aside, not with anger, but with quiet dignity. She had no interest in being their spectacle. Her first words of the night came not to reporters, but to the children who had gathered backstage, waiting nervously with notebooks and posters. She knelt down, sweat still dripping from her braids, and said softly, "Don't let anyone tell you what you can't be. The world will laugh until you make them listen." The footage spread almost as fast as the knockout. Millions shared the clip. It wasn't the punch that made her immortal. It was that sentence, spoken with calm certainty. Meanwhile, Damien Cross disappeared from the spotlight. His arrogance, once celebrated, now haunted him. Clips of his pre-fight taunts, calling her street trash, mocking her presence, played side by side with his collapse on the canvas. Commentators labeled it the fall of the Cobra. Sponsors withdrew. Fans abandoned him. His humiliation was complete, not because he lost a fight, but because the world saw the cruelty behind his confidence. For weeks after, debates raged on television, radio, and online forums. Was this the end of Cross's career? Could he ever recover? But louder than those debates was the story of Kesha Campbell. She became a symbol, not just of an upset, but of something greater. The power of resilience, the dignity of the underestimated, the justice of truth revealed under the brightest lights. Universities invited her to speak. Civil rights groups championed her name. Documentaries began filming. Children painted murals of her in neighborhoods that had never known heroes who looked like them. But Kesha remained unchanged. She trained each morning on cracked asphalt, even when the offers for luxury gyms poured in. She ate simple meals, even when sponsors promised banquets. She returned to Kingston not as a celebrity, but as a daughter of the streets, who had shown the world what those streets could produce. When asked by a reporter what victory meant to her, she paused before answering. It's not about me. It's about the next girl who walks into a gym and doesn't get laughed at. It's about the child who learns that being underestimated is not a curse, it's a weapon. Tonight, they thought I was weak. Tonight, they learned what strength really looks like. That quote was etched into headlines, printed on posters, engraved into the memory of millions. And so, the fight became more than a sporting event. It became a story retold in classrooms, in sermons, in living rooms across the globe. A story about a champion who thought cruelty was power, and a young woman who proved that dignity always strikes back. Damien Cross would be remembered, yes, but as the man who underestimated lightning. Kesha Campbell, however, would be remembered as something far greater. A storm that rose from the streets, a fighter who turned humiliation into history, a voice that carried dignity into every corner of the world. Because sometimes the most important battles aren't for belts, or titles, or money. Sometimes the most important battles are for respect. And on that night, in that ring, Kesha Campbell took respect, and with it, changed the world.